Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
FunBelt Podcast.
FunBelt Podcast.
FunBelt Podcast.
FunBelt Podcast.
It's just a great conference that is at a point right now where they're, I think, clearly the best Group of Five conference in the country.
The state of Sunbelt football is the strongest in our history.
And we got to continue to showcase what our league's about.
This league is insane.
Yeah, it might be like one of those 8 wonders of the world.
And you can see just what a great Group of Five conference it really is.
It's a big deal.
Boy, life is looking pretty good in the Sun Belt these days.
We've taken arguably the best or the most up-and-coming Group of Five conference and made it even better. And so that's only going to help us overall as a conference. It doesn't make it any easier for us. I will say, if we'll just focus on the western side of that, our division, you've got a lot of programs, great programs, that have 1 or 2 year head coaches. They've got guys that are at great programs, but they've never been a head coach before. Or the guys that are building a program, they're only in their second year. So you look at Arkansas State, Texas State, Lafayette, Southern Miss, South Alabama, Troy. Everybody's got a coach 1 or 2 years experience only. And so now on our side, okay, is somebody going to tumble? Is somebody going to slip? Or is somebody going to jump up faster than us? And so I think if you'd say this is a good time for us to be building, because we have a lot of teams in our division building. I don't know that you can say the same thing about Coastal or the same thing about Appalachian State or even Georgia State, who've been so good, you know. Of course, Marshall always brings a great football team, and I've coached against them several times. And many people here don't know about James Madison. You're talking about a 1AA championship caliber team that will bring a bigger budget than most everybody in our conference right off the bat. And so that's what they've got there. So it's a great conference. What we got to do is we just got to take care of our season and do the best we can with ours and let the chips fall. But I'm excited about being in the Sun Belt. I think it's a good time to be in the Sun Belt.
Second year ULM head coach Terry Bowden brings us into this week's episode, talking about the new members coming into the Sun Belt Conference, as well as how the West, Jeremy, where we reside.
Yeah.
It's not a very good division right now, but it's coming up. The Warhawks are rebuilding. They might as well be contributing to everyone else rebuilding in the Sun Belt West.
You know what? I say absolute bullshit to that, Thibs. The Sun Belt West is probably the most exciting division of the Sun Belt, simply because that there is really no template for which to follow. Anybody can assume that top position. It is going to be a dogfight to who wins that division, because it's really even Steven from the Cajuns to the Warhawks and everybody in between. So I am looking forward to the Sun Belt West. Shane, I know you're a citizen of the East, and you're probably viewing us snobbily, like, we'll let the little people fight it out, and then we'll win the championship. Forget it, Shane, and I'll tell you why. Because the Sun Belt Championship runs through the West, baby, with the Cajuns having the championship last year.
Yeah, and they might be the best overall team again. I don't know. I mean, obviously, there's some change over there. But I wouldn't be shocked, and I think the East is deeper. I wouldn't be shocked if the champion comes out of the West, especially when it comes down to one game. But yeah, it should be fun. Like, just looking at the West Division, it's a matter of, are any of these teams that have been a little bit down, struggling a little bit, are any of them ready to make a jump right now? I think there might be a few, but who that ends up being is kind of up in the air.
Ego aside, Shane, I think we can all agree that the East probably has the better DNA than the West has. But I think you're right, Shane. I think there are some teams that could step up this year that could show out a little bit. Shane, what do you think is one of those teams?
Oh, well, you tell me what you think about Texas State, since you know the quarterback quite well. I feel like if they get a good showing out of him, maybe they're a team that can make a little bit of a jump.
All right. So here's the thing. And I don't want to besmirch anybody's quarterback or, pretend that I am some evaluator of talent. But I will say that Lane Hatcher was a very good quarterback for Arkansas State.
But he didn't fit the system.
He didn't fit the system. And here's another thing. His talent is solely reliant on the 50% ball. He is not afraid to throw it up and let the talent of his wide receivers make the play. That's what I loved about him when he had Omar Bayless. That's what I loved about him when he had Jay Adams. But when those two big physical wide receivers left Arkansas State, that's when he started to have some trouble. He couldn't throw that ball up anymore. I don't know if Texas State has the wide receiver talent that Lane Hatcher needs to succeed. Lane Hatcher is a great leader, but he needs strong physical wide receivers. And that will be what determines whether or not the Bobcats have an offense that can win the West or not.
With that said, though, when we look at the win projections for this upcoming season, obviously Louisiana Lafayette leads the charge at 8-5. Troy 8.5 wins on the season. So basically 9 wins on the season. Troy with 6.5 wins. So 7 wins on the season. Do you think Troy has that big of an improvement this season under the first-year head coach?
I will go ahead and take that and just say I'm scared of Troy as somebody who's a little more in tune with the West than the East. Troy is just always one of those under the radar programs that puts its nose to the grindstone and comes out with great talent each and every year. A lot of people are kind of looking at the Cajuns as repeating. I feel like maybe Troy is the favorite this year in the FunBelt West, especially since they spent so many years now hardening their offense and defense against the grindstone that is the FunBelt East. I think they come into the West and have a little bit easier hoeing. So yeah, I feel like that Troy's the team to beat.
You're not looking at preview magazines and things. They seem to be one of the teams in the conference that has the most coming back as far as returning starters, 2 deep, everything else. They do look like somebody who could make a note. And like you said, they're probably going to be playing a little bit easier schedule in conference. Yeah, I could see that from Troy.
Who does Troy open up with this year, Thibs? I know we wrote that down.
They're at Ole Miss to start.
Yes.
So right away they give themselves a test. And I think, I know that those type of games can be sort of a coin toss as to how well people perform, but I do also think that it'll show us a lot as to what kind of team Troy is. Is it strong? Is it physical? Is it deep in the trenches? And I think Troy could be that team. I think Troy is more set to become the Sunbelt West leader than Texas State. And I do believe Texas State's a good team. So, but I think Troy's got it.
Yeah, just looking at Troy's schedule right now, they're a team that might fall off of people's radar early on, just looking at their schedule, because they go to Ole Miss to start. Got Alabama A&M after that. So nobody's going to care what happens in that one or get much of a sense from that. Then they've got Appalachian State and Marshall, their 2 East games. And then they're kind of jumping into that West. So it might be October before we really kind of see much out of them, or, they might struggle early in the season and then all of a sudden start really bringing it on late. So, it'll be interesting to watch them. Will we kind of overlook them early in the season and then by November be saying, oh, where'd Troy come from?
I think that's true. And I think a lot of it will have to do with quarterback play and who they have behind center. But we do always know that they're pretty strong in the middle. They'll always have that good red zone defense. And Troy is one of the sneakiest programs when it comes to being well-resourced. They have great facilities. They're out there in Troy, Alabama. They've had some great upgrades. So they always seem to get some good they always get good recruits. Sorry, that was the beer talking. New coach, I guess we'll have to see. Wait, they have a new coach, right? Am I wrong about that? Yeah, they have a new guy.
They have a new coach.
Yeah, so even though I kind of slammed the Cajuns for sort of having a semi-new coach out there, I just don't feel like Troy loses as much as the Cajuns do.
So the third best team based on win projections is South Alabama, 5.5, so 6 wins on the season. I think to me, that's the biggest question mark in the West this year is what the South Alabama have, knowing they lost their quarterback, they lost their star receiver, but then bring a lot of that defense back that they had that was pretty good and able to kind of hold their own this past season.
Yeah, South Alabama was a big disappointment for me last year. It's hard for me to get behind those guys again. I really felt like they had everything going for them in 2021, and they simply couldn't close the deal. They couldn't close escrow on some of those games. I don't know what to think of South Alabama. South Alabama could come in last in the Sun Belt West, and I would not be surprised.
Or win it all, is what you're saying.
They could win it all too, because anybody can win it all in the Sun Belt West, right? Even ULM.
Easy. I'm still a little weary of putting any kind of faith in South Alabama right now because of how badly we were burned last year in not only
badly burned
football, but also in basketball.
And baseball too, for me. I kind of thought they were going to have a good baseball program.
So yeah, it's a little hard to kind of put all the faith into the Jaguars, knowing that they let us down so badly last year, even though we all love Kane Womack, the governor.
Kane Womack is great, but how many times can we allow that team to break our hearts, Thibs? We can't. We're flesh and blood. There is only so much damage our hearts can take.
I have over 40 years of ULM. Trust me, there's plenty more time for them to crush my soul, heart, and everything else. Moving on from there, Southern Miss, the new kid on the block, kind of middle of the pack there, 4.5 win projections. I think that they are the ones really with the most to prove. But I think that that's not even with them coming into the Sun Belt. I think this was a big year for them regardless, that they had to show some improvements. The schedule really doesn't do them any favors, though, when straight out the gate they're hosting Liberty. Then they go to Miami in week number 2, and then we trickle on down from there. But it's not going to be easy for this Southern Miss team. But what do y'all think early on of this Southern Miss team? Do you think that this is a team that can get that 4.5 wins?
I think they can get to 4.5 wins. I don't know how competitive they're going to be in the Sun Belt right away, as far as, competing for a division title. I think they'll beat some teams, but I still think there's some rebuilding going on there. It just seems like there's a lot of question marks, especially on offense with them outside of, Frank Gore Jr. Who's going to move the ball for them? I really have no clue. But nothing really surprised me with the West, like we said. So what happens from there? Hard to say, but I think they can get to that 4.5. I think they can get 4 to 5 wins. Whether or not they really contend for anything, I'm not quite there with them yet.
And you know what, Shane? The Thibs kind of set up that the out of conference part of their schedule was kind of tough, and it is. Liberty's not an easy team to play, but let's bear in mind that Liberty lost 2 or 3 games versus the Sun Belt last year. So it's not like Liberty is a gold standard when it comes to out of conference programs to play. They also get Tulane before they start playing in conference. Tulane is also one of those kind of hit and miss AAC schools that have some years they're good, some years they're bad. The Southern Miss really does have an opportunity to have a really good out of conference record by the time they start playing in Sun Belt play. I tell you one thing about Southern Miss that we'll talk to the legendary Phil Steele later on. He's very high on Mississippi, the Golden Eagles, Southern Miss. He's really high on those guys. I couldn't figure out why. But one thing that I was really surprised about Southern Miss is how little they've played Sun Belt programs. If you look in their history, they don't play a lot of Sun Belt. And they, for instance, Arkansas State, we've only played a handful of times. It's kind of crazy with the distances that we've not played them but a few times. So to me, Southern Miss is a bit of a mystery. I don't know where Southern Misfits on this. Phil likes them. I don't like them very much at all, but I don't know. Thibs, what do you think?
I think they're all TBD. I really do. I mean, kind of like Shane said, we know Frank Gore is going to get the ball. He's going to probably be over 1,000-yard rusher. Beyond that, I couldn't really tell you what this Eagle team is going to do offensively or defensively, even beyond knowing that they're going to have a strong running game. The assumption would be that that's going to be a strong offensive line that can really create those running lanes for him. But is this the year that maybe they don't have that good offensive line? TBD.
I guess we'll figure it out.
We come now to the great Bobcats. Don't call them Boobcats ever again, Jeremy.
How can I? They're our ultimate, Arkansas State's ultimate rival. So I have to give them nothing but props and respect.
5-win projection. I don't think that if they hit the 5 wins, that Jake Spavital is coming back for another year at Texas State. I think that they have to go at least 7 wins in order to have him renewed as their head coach. And I think that that's the expectation this year, is that they have a 7-win season.
Is this our first official hot seat announcement? Jake Spavital, Texas State.
I think it is. And, you know, they come straight out the gate going to Nevada. That's kind of a tough place to play, not only because of the time, but I mean, Nevada's a pretty good team there out of the Mountain West. You have week 2 where they should have a pretty easy game there against FIU coming to Bobcat Stadium on a Friday night. But then you go right after that to Baylor. So it's kind of a hit or miss on these games. And I think that they're going to have to make every single game count.
They're going to have to make every single game count. One thing good about that game against Baylor is that when Baylor visited Texas State, I guess it was last season, right? 2021.
It was.
It was a close game. It wasn't. I had predicted a Texas State upset because for some reason every year at the beginning of the year, Shane, I don't know if you know this, but every year I just assume that Texas State is finally going to pull it all together and be this great team. I thought they were going to beat the Bobcats to open up the season. They didn't. I'm sorry, the Baylor Bears to open up the season. It didn't quite happen, but they put on a pretty good effort. I think that they could put up another good effort against the Baylor Bears again. And it all goes down, Shane, to what you had mentioned earlier, is their quarterback, the presumed starter, Lane Hatcher. They really need that leadership on the field. They really need to have Hatcher connecting with his wide receivers. I don't like the Bobcats as much as I like Troy, but I like the Bobcats this year.
Yeah, I mean, like we were saying before, I think they're one of those teams that it's cliche to put it all in quarterback play, but I mean, if they're getting good quarterback play out of him, I don't see why they can't win 7 or 8 games. I mean, and like, I mean, maybe the heat's on a little bit, but that's kind of where I see them right now.
And maybe the key, Thibodeau, is if you're a betting man, and we're not, because we're all moral, upright citizens of the United States.
We don't have any money.
Yeah, and we have no money. We might bet the over on the Bobcats this year. I think that might be a smart play.
With that said, I did vote or bet with some couch change the under for Louisiana Lafayette at the 8.5 games.
And probably wisely so. I think Shane, I can't speak for you, Shane, but I know Thibs and I are very down on the Cajuns this year. Are we wrong to be down on the Cajuns?
I wouldn't say you're wrong. I mean, I'm always kind of like one of those guys that's like, go with unless it's like obvious that they lost everything. I'm one of those guys that normally goes with the returning champs until somebody knocks them off to a certain degree. But I mean, they obviously, it's a different team. It's a different, still similar staff, but there are changes there. We've had guests on before who say, actually everybody's happier now than they were with Billy Napier, but there's going to be some changes. I think they're probably fortunate that they're making this transition while in a little bit of a down west. But like we said, there's some other teams we like here. the whole conference is going to beat up on each other. That's one of the things that we, look at these preview magazines and everything. Nobody's picking anybody to go 11-1 or 10-2 in the Sun Belt. Everybody's saying that the champion's going to win 8 or 9 games, and I don't think it's crazy to pick the under on almost anybody at this point.
Oh my God! Did Keith Gill create a conference that was so good that will never make it to the national championship because we're beating up on each other? Oh,
we were never going to make it anyway, Jeremy. We were never going to make it anyway. But look, I'm not saying that the Cajuns are like a 2-win team or anything crazy like that. Basically, I'm saying they're not going to win 9 games this year because they're, like you said, the conference is going to beat up on one another. They've lost a lot. They're still probably a 7 or 8 win team. That still covers the under. Sorry.
And maybe this is the conversation to have next week after we've talked about both divisions. But week 1 is going to be so huge for the Sun Belt. There's winnable games against good teams that can really kind of set the reputation for the conference before they start beating each other up, because you look at both divisions and it's hard to imagine somebody being that 11-1 top 15 team again this year, because they're gonna knock each other off.
Shane, I felt like that last year too. Last year was the same kind of deal where there were a lot of great first game matchups that was really going to set the tone for the Sun Belt. But when it comes to the Cajuns, Shane, you said you sound like it was like almost like a cliche to put it on the quarterback. I don't know much about Chandler Fields. That's the presumed starter for the Cajuns. I mean, when you've had a guy that was behind center for it seemed like 100 years, and then you get a new guy come in, to me, that is even a bigger question mark than having this new coach who was the defensive coordinator there forever, DiGiorno, come in. So this quarterback, not knowing who he is, where he comes from, I think that is a huge red flag for the Cajuns. And I get it when it's, Shane, you were like, they're the champions and they're champions until they're proven otherwise. I just felt like they lost so much. And it wasn't just like some mediocre talent that left the Cajuns this year. It was like 4-star guys that were just taking off. It wasn't just to Florida. It was like the TCU and other places. So there's just a lot of stuff that left. So I don't know.
And maybe if I was more sold on one particular team otherwise, maybe if I was just like super high on Troy or somebody right now, I would feel a little bit different. But right now it's just sort of like, well, if I don't know who it's going to be, I guess Louisiana is my choice. But like,
that's a good point. That's a good point. So it might as well be the champion.
Yeah.
So one other thing there, Jeremy, you talked about the Baylor game there with Texas State and how it was a close game last year.
Yeah.
They should be able to make it a close game next year, or this year rather. Point of reference involving the Bears, even 2012, they come to Malone Stadium in Monroe. The Bears walk out 47-42 winners. Okay, it was a great game. It was the whiteout. Everything was just phenomenal. It was great. 2013, it's circled. Going to Casey Floyd Stadium in Waco. It's going to be a great game, right?
Yeah, if you say so.
70-7 Bears.
So they wake up and they're like, okay, we got to punish these guys.
To quote somebody in the press box for that game as the third quarter ended, we got 15 more minutes of this shit.
We had a similar thing happen at Arkansas State. We ended up tying Mississippi State back in 1993, I think it was. And the next year when Mississippi State played us, it was something like a 60-5 massacre. It was like, all right, screw you guys. We're really angry with you now, and we're going to punish you on the scoreboard. Get us back on track, Thibs. Now that you pulled us off the track, get us back on track.
Well, we're at the bottom for win projections. ULM 2.5.
Ooh.
So 3 wins. I actually like that pick almost as a dead on. I said it from the beginning. Warhawks had 4 wins last year. I said this year's team would be a lot better of a product, but probably still will not go above 3, maybe 4 wins again.
Yeah, but you know who I like?
B.
Well, I mean, that's still up for grabs.
True.
No, Chandler Rogers, the quarterback for ULM. I think that guy has some moxie. And you know who else I like? Terry Bowden as coach. I thought that was an odd fit when he came to Monroe. It now seems to me like it's the perfect fit. It seems like Terry Bowden belongs in Monroe. And he seems like he's having a pretty good time out there. Your first opponent's Texas. Is that ideal? No.
Worked out good last year for the Cajuns. Just throwing that out there.
I was going to say, besides Texas, who's the other win, do you think?
You got Nichols that second game.
Surely. But I think we'll know better of how that Nichols goes based off of week 1, because Nichols is actually opening up at South Alabama. And I like that Nichols team. It's a good FCS program. It's a program with Tim Rebadeau still leading the Colonels.
Yeah.
He knows Sunbelt. And a lot of D1 transfers there. He's going to have the Colonels ready to play.
Nichols is a very dangerous FBS team, and then our FCS team, and then you go right into the Lions' den there with Alabama. Now, tell me if I'm wrong, Thibs, but didn't ULM beat Alabama once? I'm a little foggy on that. Was that like in
2007, the first year of Saban taking over the Tide? And actually, if you look at the records, the Warhawks have a winning record over Alabama because of forfeited, vacated games, however you want to say it. So the Warhawks have a winning record against Alabama. So we might be charitable enough this year to allow them to finally get one in the series.
You know what? Here's my thought. And Shane, back me up on this, because you and I, we don't know for sure, but I feel like Saban is probably pissed off every time he hears that story about how the Warhawks humiliated him during his first year in Alabama. Probably is tired of that story.
It was a Pearl Harbor type moment, remember?
Do I remember? Barely. I was like a child.
No, you weren't.
It was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. And it's frustrating that game is still held onto as if it just happened like last year. We're coming up now on what, 15 years ago? These kids on both sides of the ball don't even know that happened.
No, but let me tell you, if Appalachian State can relive that win over Michigan every damn year, you guys can relive that win over Alabama every year. I give you permission, because if one team can celebrate their one glorious win and make it sound like it was the launching point to the world's most stunning upset, you go ahead and you take that. Hey, by the way, Shane, have you ever heard that Appalachian State beat Michigan?
I have.
Yeah.
I do think Appalachian State's had a few games since then that they have celebrated too, though. Maybe is the difference.
No, they only celebrate that win against Michigan. That's the only one they care about.
They were 1-10 that year, right, Jeremy?
Were they? Yeah.
No.
I don't even know.
They were national champs that year.
Were they? I'm surprised I didn't follow that. I'm surprised I don't know that, because Appalachian State does like to remind us of that. And you're going to find that out, JMU. You're going to find all about Appalachian State. Oh, yeah.
So, anyway, I think that the Warhawks, again, 3, maybe 4 wins again this year, but a lot better of a product, a lot better competitive games. With that said, you look at last season, there were 3 games that were decided by a score or less.
Yeah.
So the Warhawks very easily could have been 7 wins last year and bowl eligible.
Yeah, I remember.
Are they able to kind of do that again and keep games close? Is the always big wild card. I just don't know how much that depth is, because it's a lot of new faces coming back.
Yeah,
And so it is a question mark of how quickly can they put it together and what does it look like?
you got Chandler. You also got Boogie Knight. That's pretty much all you need. Now, I don't know exactly if you got the defense or ULM has the defense to be competitive, and that always seems to be the key, right? I mean, Sunbelt's always been known for having teams that score a lot of points, right? That's kind of like a Sunbelt tradition. But the teams that win the championships are the teams with the good defense. Does ULM have that? I don't know.
You're so loud, Jeremy. You're scratching your mic.
Sorry, actually I have my Phil Steele magazine scraping across the keyboard. Sorry about that.
Just because you rub that on the mic does not mean he's going to come on the show.
Oh, I keep thinking it's like a genie, that if I keep rubbing the pages, the powerful Phil Steele will explain. You know what we haven't talked about, by the way, is Arkansas State. You've talked about every Sun Belt West team, but you haven't talked about Arkansas State. I want to know why.
I just wanted to see how long it would take you to realize we didn't talk about the Red Wolves.
Is it some kind of bias? Is it fear? It's fear, isn't it? You're afraid of the Red Wolves. I get that. You know what? ULM has lived in fear of the Red Wolves for 10, 15, 200 years. It is time that you got rid of that fear, Thibodeau, and face those fears head on.
Yeah, it's been a while since the Warhawks have gotten a win, especially one in Jonesboro like they will get to play this year. Yeah. And so it's always a game. I'll say that it's either a blowout or one of the crazy games that you don't know how it's going to end until it's over.
Always the most exciting game in the Sun Belt. Red Wolves versus Warhawks.
I do like, though, that
it's a good game.
They obviously have Grambling, so you'll get to see the greatest band in all of HBCU.
Yeah.
The Grambling Tigers. And then traveling to the Ohio State.
Yeah. So that's 2 wins. And then we have the third game. So, yeah. I'll tell you what thing about Grambling, though. And weigh in on this, Shane. Tell me what you think about this. So anytime you mention Grambling, it's always like, oh, halftime's going to be a blast. Oh, it's going to be great. Grambling's coming to town. Nobody ever says, well, Grambling has a good football team, too. Maybe we should watch Grambling for its football program. Do you think that if you're a football player on Grambling, it's almost like you're playing for the band?
Maybe it's, I don't know. Is it? I mean, they used to be so good in football.
Yeah, sure.
And that's why people got to know their band. And then I don't know what's happened the last 20 years or so. But I mean, I don't know. Is it frustrating? Is there a culture war on the Grambling campus between the jocks and the musicians?
I don't know, but there was there was sort of an advertisement that was floating around Twitter a couple days ago, and it had like an image of one of the Red Wolves wide receivers, Jeff Foreman, and opposite of that image was an image of a Grambling band member.
Yeah, there's not a lot of programs that are promoting their season, their team that way.
Like, what if it was like for Alabama? What if it was like the ULM game versus Alabama, and it was like, oh man, that halftime's gonna be smoking. We got that Alabama Crimson Tide band. It's gonna be great. Well, you don't hear that.
Yeah.
It's a marketing ploy. It's whatever it takes to try to sell the tickets. And to me, what's crazy is that you're advertising don't worry about coming in the gates when for kickoff. Just wait a little bit. We kick off at 6 o'clock. Just wait. Come in around 7:30. You'll be fine.
Yeah, because it's going to be hot at first. Wait until the sun comes down and there's some shadows in the stands. Sit back, enjoy the halftime show, because Grambling's going to be kicking it. It's gonna slap. That's what it's going to be. And then there might be some football being played. So, yes, but in terms of Arkansas State, I think now, are they ranked below ULM in your little your point system there, Thibodeau?
It's not a point system. It is the win projections from DraftKings Sportsbook.
All right. Well, fine.
They are at a 5-win.
Okay, 5-1. That's right. In fact, because I am such a wealthy man, I did put about $50 on that, saying pick the over on that, simply because I'm a glutton for punishment, and money means nothing to me. But yeah, you know what? Here's the thing with Arkansas State is that the defense was so horrendous last year. It was really hard to gauge anything from that team, except that the defense, probably unknown to most people, really started improving as the season went on. And so Butch Jones did his due diligence, brought in some new guys, had the best recruiting session of 2022 for the Sun Belt. So there's a lot of optimism in Jonesboro about the team and where it's headed. Maybe a lot of caution, though, this year as to what the team's going to do. So, again, it's like anybody can win the Sun Belt, including the Warhawks, including the Bobcats, including Southern Miss. And the Red Wolves could have a good showing, too. But, yeah, here's the thing. We'll probably win against Ohio State and go 4-8 for the season.
So let me ask you this, though, Jeremy. Does the schedule really matter when you have Grambling to open it up at the beginning of September and you don't play at home again until the beginning of October when ULM comes to town? Does that take a toll when you have all these road games back to back? And I mean, I know that Memphis is, essentially a home game. It's only an hour and a half away from Jonesboro, but you're still not sleeping in your own bed. Does that kind of take a toll on the team, you think?
I don't know if it takes a toll on a team. The team gets up and plays anywhere, anytime, right? I do know it takes a toll on fans. When the team is gone for so long, and especially if they don't get some good wins over that time, like if they lose to Ohio State in a horrible fashion and then don't perform well against Memphis, and what's the fourth? Then it's the ULM game, right? No.
Old Dominion.
Old Dominion, and then go all the way to Old Dominion, which is all the way out on the East Coast, and don't do well there somehow. And then they come back. By then, the steam is lost from the season. The fans are pissed off and they're not showing up. So it's really important in those 3 away games to do something pretty good. And if you don't, it just saps the energy out of the whole season.
Shane, just know that you'll never be able to get another word in edgewise on the Red Wolves because Jeremy and his beloved pair have it covered.
Oh, yeah. Well, Shane, what's your thoughts on the Red Wolves? Yeah, let's hear it.
Well, my big question for Jeremy is, this is the first Sun Belt West road trip for JMU and their fans.
Yeah.
What do the people that follow me need to know about Jonesboro? Where do they go?
They definitely need to go to J Towns, which is the local bar across the street from the stadium. Great bar food, great beer selection. Check it out. Maybe go to the old downtown where they've got a lot of cool bars to go to and great eating establishments. There's a lot of space for tailgate. So bring a tent, get out there, hobnob and mingle. And what day is that day?
October 8th.
Oh, October 8th. It's still going to be hot as hell. It's going to be gross. So wear some light clothing. Don't be ashamed to show off some sweat stains. Bring some beer. Nobody really hassles you. Share some beer with some others. A-State fans are very gracious. So you'll come by my tent. Shane, I will be there with you with some cold beer, maybe a hamburger, and we'll make a day of it.
Oh, it sounds perfect.
All right, so we've made our prognostications about the Sun Belt West. And I feel like we're pretty knowledgeable about the Sun Belt West. Am I right? I mean, we're FunBelt podcast. We know what we're talking about.
Almost days.
Almost days, sure. Maybe not every day. Sometimes we forget a few things. Sometimes we don't know. But for the most part, I like to think of us as the repository of wisdom for the Sun Belt. It's right here. It's a living memory. But there might be one person with more knowledge of college football than anybody we know. Would you like to hazard a guess of who that is, Thibs?
Kara Ritchie.
Yeah, she's pretty good. Shane, what do you think? Who has the most knowledge?
I mean, I can't think of anybody more than Dusty. So
Wow.
you're gonna have to fill me in.
Wow, my head is no longer able to fit in the picture. I'm ducking out after that.
Dusty's knowledge of like Nicholls State is actually pretty impressive, but it doesn't hold a candle to the amount of pure information, pure light energy that our next guest has. Every year he produces a magazine, college football preview, that's about as thick as like a ham, chock full of information. And the information, here's what surprises me, guys. The information is always accurate. You never like look in there and say, well, yeah, but this player actually transferred a year ago, so he won't be making a difference. Or obviously this person, or obviously whoever wrote this write-up doesn't have any idea about the nature of the rivalry between these two teams. This guy that we have on the show has an acute understanding of every single team, not just in the FBS, but maybe in the FCS too. And that guy's Phil Steele. He's coming out of our green room right now. Let's welcome him in. Phil, how long have you been doing this?
You know, this is actually the 28th year for the magazine. It's hard to believe that it's been that long that we've been doing it, but it's been definitely a passion of mine and something that we pour a lot of energy into each and every year.
So I know that you and your staff, that you guys talk to every single program, which is an astounding feat. But I was wondering, did you have any clue that that USC and who's the other one?
UCLA.
Yeah. Did you have any clue that they were going to drop this bomb on us?
Yeah, I tell you what, I may talk to the coaches out there, but we generally are talking about the players on the field, the strengths and weaknesses, positions, things like that. Occasionally we'll get a little off the target, but I generally take about an hour to talk to each coach, and that's a lot of the time to take up the coach's time. So I don't stray too far from the actual conversations to talk conference alignment or anything like that with them. So no, I did not. But when Oklahoma and Texas left for the SEC, they said here, who would the Big Ten go after? I go, well, the only teams really that would have that type of impact of Oklahoma and Texas, or close to it, not the same, would be USC and UCLA, and that's who they went for.
Yeah, so I wonder, 28 years, have you seen anything similar to this type of conference brouhaha, conference chaos?
No, definitely not. I mean, remember, there used to be the Southwest Conference back in the 60s and early 70s, and then that went away into the Big 12, but that was about it. And you remember when Nebraska moved to the Big 10, there was a lot, are they making the right decision? What's going on? Turns out they made the right decision, because being in the Big 10 is where you want to be. But, those are minor little things compared to what we're about to have. I do think one of the Big Five, the Power Five conferences, goes out last year. If you would ask me at this time, which Power Five conference is going away, I would have said the Big 12. But now you have to look at it and say, but it's probably going to be the Pac-12. So we'll find out. It's a good thing I don't have to forecast conference moves. I just worry about the teams on the field.
I know it's a little bit out of your purview, but I had to ask you about that because you're so connected. And quite frankly, if you had told me in 2012 that the Sun Belt was going to outlast the Pac-12, I probably would have laughed myself into unconsciousness. That's crazy to me.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. That's a great statement. I'm going to use that in future radio shows this year. That's a good one.
You go ahead. I will not trademark that. So, Phil, what we had you on the show is we wanted to ask you a little bit about the Sun Belt, what your overall take is on the Sun Belt. Who do you think is going to stand out? Maybe some surprises. But, we did have realignment from last year, this last round of realignment. turn out to be a pretty big win for the Sun Belt, adding adding 4 more teams. What's your overall impression of the Sun Belt this year?
Oh, clearly, it's one of the strongest Group of 5 conferences out there. I mean, you look at the strength at the top. I think the last couple of years it's been App State, Coastal Carolina, and Louisiana. But now you look at the rest of the teams in this conference. I love what was brought over from CUSA. I mean, Marshall's a team that, frankly, has underachieved maybe the last 2 years. Had a team better than their record each of the last 2 seasons, and I think they'll be like that this year. Old Dominion, you didn't know what to expect last year. They're coming off a year of not playing football. Generally, that takes a long time to turn around. They opened up the season 1-5, but could easily have been at that point 3-3. You know, they missed an extra point against Buffalo and gave up that 52-yard touchdown pass with 33 seconds left to Marshall, which cost them there. And then you look at a team also like James Madison coming in from the FCS. And James Madison, all they've done is qualified for the playoffs 8 straight years, won 1 national title, and played in the finals 2 other ones. And they should be able to fit right in. So I think that the teams they have added, even Southern Miss is a team that went through like a little bit of a rebuilding unit last year, but they're much improved this season. I think it helps strengthen the conference greatly.
So we have the new people coming in, but who do you think comes in the strongest? Not just the 4 new people come in, but in each division, the West and the East. Who do you like?
Well, I'll tell you, let's start with the East. The East, to me, is the strongest division in the Sun Belt. There's no question about that. I think if you go 1 through 6 in the East, you could probably put those guys in the top 8 of the conference. So App State, I love the fact that, Sean Clark is in his 3rd year. He's got a veteran team coming back with 12 returning starters and Chase Bryce at QB. I think they're the best team in the East this year. Now, Marshall, as touched on, they have sort of underachieved the last 2 years. They got off to big starts both years and then faded a little bit down the stretch. They were a better team than 7-6 last year. If they get good quarterback play, they got Rashawn Ali at the running back spot. They've got one of the best defenses in the conference. So I think they're going to be a clear-cut threat. And then how do you discount the job that Jamie Chadwell's doing at Coastal Carolina? Nobody expected anything 2 years ago. They went 11-1. Last year, they were 2 plays away from being undefeated. They do only have 7 returning starters, but one of them is Grayson McCall, who's arguably the best quarterback in the conference. So they're going to be a contender. Georgia State played much better in the second half of last year. They almost knocked off Auburn on the road, as you recall. And this year, they do have to play App State, Southern Miss, Marshall, James Madison all on the road. But they play well on the road. And I love the job that Elliott's doing there. They've got a strong running game and defense. Old Dominion's, after last year being quite inexperienced, is now experienced. They got a lot of momentum going, 17 returning starters. James Madison is a team. They've got playoff experience in the FCS and plenty of talent. And then even Georgia Southern. When my conversation with Coach Helton, the one interesting thing that I pull out of the conversation the most, I was concerned with how you're going to adapt from the option naturally to the pro-style offense. That's always your biggest concern. A couple of things go in there. You generally you're lacking in wide receivers with the option offense, and you also have to teach the offensive line pass blocking as opposed to run blocking. Well, he was very pleased with the receivers he inherited. He said that the 3 guys he had back at the top, Hood, Jones, and Burgess, were all top-notch wide receivers. So he was pleasantly surprised with what he inherited at receiver. They bring in Van Treese from Buffalo. The offensive line, still a question mark in my mind, and it's still a work in progress. But they do have some talent there, and we'll see how they do. And defensively, he brought in a lot of transfers as well. So I think without the transfer portal, Georgia Southern might have been like a 1-11 team, but with the transfer portal, they could pleasantly surprise. So I think the East is the best division top to bottom.
Well, I tell you what about that Georgia Southern. We've been talking about Georgia Southern on this show for a couple months now, ever since Helton came in. We had him on the show and discussed a little bit about his transition from big-time California football to coming to Georgia Southern and working his magic on a system that he probably is probably not familiar with. Do you get the sense that they're throwing away the triple option?
They are throwing away the triple option. They my thought process coming in was he would keep a semblance of the triple option, sort of do it what Collins did at Georgia Tech. Bring in you have your personnel is geared to the option. But not only did I talk to Coach Helton and discuss it, I did that after I'd watched the spring game. They are clearly going to be a pass offense this year. So it is one of the tougher transitions out there, switching from the option to a pass offense. But that is definitely what they're doing. That's the move they're going to in the future. And remember, a couple of years ago they tried that. Or not a couple of years ago, probably like 10 years ago, and they really struggled in that process. That's why I said I think the transfer portal is going to help them in that regard, and they are going to turn into a team that probably passes the ball more than they run it, and the option is gone.
So we talked a little bit about the West too, or the East, I'm sorry, and we know that is the most competitive division in the Sun Belt. But let's talk a little bit about the Wild Wild West. What do you see coming out of that?
Yeah, and it's just what you touched on. I could make a case for almost any of the teams really having a shot at winning it. And the main reason why is Louisiana. Louisiana lost a lot of players from last year. They only have 11 starters coming back. They lose their longtime QB in Levi Lewis. They lose their top 3 tacklers on the defensive side of the ball. And there are some questions. They lose a pretty good head coach as well, and Billy Napier is off to Florida. I still think when you look at Louisiana, talent-wise, they should be right at the top, provided Chris Smith stays healthy at the spot. And they are my pick to win the West. But, you run down the rest of the West. Go to Troy, for example. Troy's the team that basically is 3 plays away. 1 play in 2019, 1 play in 2020, and 1 play in 2021 from being a bowl team each of the 3 years, and yet they ended up with 5 wins each year. They have got 18 returning starters, a new attitude under John Sumrall, a very dangerous defense. I love their defensive line. I think it's one of the best in the conference, if not the best in the conference. Their linebacking core is solid, so a dangerous defense, a very good offense. Troy is a team that's on the rise. Will Hall at Southern Miss had just an injury-plagued year last year. They lost quarterbacks. They were down to like their 5th, 6th-string quarterback. At one point, they were playing running backs at quarterback at the end of the year. But now they've got 16 returning starters. They're in much better shape. And I think they'll be one of the most improved teams in the entire country this year. And the benefit they have playing in the Sun Belt is not a lot of Sun Belt teams have traveled to Hattiesburg to play, and they've got a pretty good home field edge there. South Alabama with Kane Womack, once again, they've got a very good defensive line, which is a great starting spot. And they bring in a Toledo transfer and Carter Bradley, who Coach Womack was very high on when I talked to him. They do lose Jalen Tolbert, but I think they'll be fine with Jalen Wayne at the wide receiver spot. And last year, remember, they opened up 5-3, and then they lost their last games. If they can get that momentum they had early in the year, I think they get back to a bowl game. Jake Spavital, I mean, it's his 4th year. He's had 4 years building this team. 2 years ago, I thought they played great. In fact, after the 2020 season, it was, during the COVID year, I got to watch almost Sunbelt game was on TV, in a prime spot where I could watch it and spend time watching it. I thought Texas State that year went something like 5-7 because every game I watched them, they were impressive. But they went 2-10. I was stunned at the end of the year. Last year they improved to 4-8, and I think they've got a shot at getting to a bowl game this year. Arkansas State should be one of the most improved teams in the country. You look at James Blackman at the quarterback spot coming back. If he stays healthy, they get Brian Sneak coming in from Austin Peay, who I think is going to be a surprise at the running back position. And defensively, they can only be improved. In fact, we saw the improvement last year. Very slow start to the season. Arkansas State was giving up 50 points, it seemed like, every game. But down the stretch, those last 3 games of the season only gave up about 25 points per game, and that improvement should continue. And then how about ULM and Terry Bowden? Now, he was the king of the transfer portal before the transfer portal was available. He was always looking for players. When I talked to Coach Bowden at Akron, he always be like, Phil, if you know any players that are out there, let me know because we're looking for them. Well, he's in his home here at ULM now. And last year, how about the upsets? I mean, they played Troy. They were a 24-point dog, pulled the upset. And you're thinking, well, that'll never happen. They played Malik Willis and Liberty, upset them as a 30-point dog, and then upset South Alabama as a 2-touchdown underdog. So they proved last year they could pull the upsets. He's in his 2nd year, much more stable. I do think the West has improved. They're still not to the East standards, but with these teams all improved, I think it's going to be a shootout to see who gets that 2nd, 3rd, and 4th spot this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think the best football in the Sun Belt is coming out of the West, but the division race is going to be incredibly entertaining just to see how these teams stack up. They're all sort of on an upward trajectory, except for I agree with you on Louisiana. I think a lot of people are expecting good things from the Cajuns this year, but I feel like they've lost so much. So much like it wasn't even just like rank and file guys, but four-star talents are leaving out of Louisiana. So I wish new coach the best of luck on that. That's going to be a tough pill to swallow. And you're probably right about. And you said something about the Sun Belt hasn't played Southern Miss often. You're right. I was surprised how little interaction Southern Miss has had with the Sun Belt. So it's going to be kind of a new guy coming in and being a little bit strange to see him on our fields. Dusty Thibodeau joins us on the broadcast. Dusty, Dusty, are you with us?
I'm here.
Dusty, do you have any questions for Phil before we move on?
Yeah, so Phil, really the big talk in this offseason has been conference realignment. And we've seen it again even this week with teams jumping ship to join the Big Ten. Do you think this time around, though, it's really going to trickle down to the G5 again, or do you feel the G5 is kind of stable and going to stay in the course?
Yeah, right now I don't see the G5 conferences moving a lot. What might happen, though, is, if the Power 5 teams pull some of the big boys out, then there would be a little bit of a vacuum area. A team like Boise State would be very attractive. A team like Cincinnati would be very attractive. Even the teams like App State would be attractive for the Power 5 teams. But frankly, I don't know where the heck we're headed. If you asked me last year at this time if the Big 12 could survive, I would have said, no, they just lost Oklahoma and Texas. They're probably doomed, and, other teams are going to transfer. And now it looks like they're going to be raised. Who knows how it's going to turn out? It's very interesting, and the good thing is I only worry about the teams and how they play on the field. And the Pac-12 is going to be the Pac-12 this year and next year. So I'll cross that bridge when I get to it.
I can't speak for Dusty, but I think he'd agree the Sun Belt would happily absorb Big 12 and the ACC. We could probably find a space for them in the Sun Belt.
There you go. Yeah, I think the Fun Belt would definitely enjoy that.
Yeah, come on. We'll take just about anyone who can provide a little bit of entertainment. So we talked a little bit, Dusty and Phil, about
bring Clemson in. What the heck?
We'd love to have Clemson. I mean, they'll struggle for a couple of years, but they'll get their feet in there. So we talked a little bit about the West and the East, and we talked about who looks good out of both of those divisions. Who do you see as a dark horse sort of rearing their heads? We know that the Cajuns are going to be trouble, that the Appalachian State's going to be trouble. Coastal Carolina always lingers and lurks, and perhaps Marshall might be the one that we top over. Is there a team out there that you looked at and go, these guys are sneaky good and nobody's giving them enough credit?
Yeah, I think the two teams that really jump out to me this year, number one would be Marshall. Marshall's a team that's, in my mind, always had a great defense. You go back to their years under their previous head coach, they had a great defense, and they've got another top-notch defense again this year. Offensively, if they get anything out of their quarterbacks, Henry Colombi, a guy that's played at Utah State, Texas Tech, if he does well, they've got the rest of the supporting cast there. I think Marshall is a real threat. And then Troy. As I mentioned, Troy's a team that actually could have been a bowl team, one play away from it each of the last 3 years. Prior to that, they had won 10, 11, 10 games. John Summerall was there when they were winning double-digit games, knows what you need to do to win. He's got 9 starters back on offense, 9 on defense, perhaps the best defensive line in the league. And that's always something. If you have a defensive line and you're disruptive, look at Michigan last year, for an example. Michigan was coming off a losing season, but all of a sudden Hutchinson and Ajabo stepped in, gave them that huge pass rush, and it really affected teams' offenses, made them a great defense. I think Troy's defensive line has that potential.
The depth of understanding that you have of the Sun Belt is much appreciated, Phil. I know that in recent, or not recent years, but in years past, I've looked at places who do similar type of write-ups about different teams, and they sometimes seem to have way too many errors in terms of who's on the team, what's the history of the team, what's the future of the team. You and your staff really dig deep. How is that even possible with this many teams? How do you guys do it?
Well, I tell you, part of it's me. If you ask me a question about college football, I will give you a lot of answers and be able to talk in depth about every team. If you ask me a question about NBA basketball, Major League Baseball, I have no clue about any of those other sports. I spend the entire years doing nothing but college football. Got a setup where I have 12 TVs in front of me. I'm watching 12 games all day long. And when I'm not watching games or working at my desk, to get my exercise, walk around at home and in my barn, and I watch replays of the games to get them. And I enjoy watching the Sun Belt and the MAC and the Group of Five. And really one of the areas of our expertise is the fact that we give 2 full pages on a conference like the Sun Belt, same amount of coverage as we give Alabama and Oklahoma. And then, of course, talking to the coaches. And the coaches in the Sun Belt have been very gracious with their time with me. Some take an hour, some take an hour and a half to go over the entire team with me, and I appreciate that, and it helps me learn about the team even more. So it's just something that this is what I do year round. If you took me to a grocery store, I'd be lost. If you take me anywhere, but if it's college football, I'm pretty good with that.
Yeah, so I was wondering about that too. You said, I talk an hour to these guys, but does it sometimes go beyond that hour?
Oh yes, definitely. There's some coaches that we'll talk an hour and a half, hour 45 minutes, and that's when I just put hour plus because sometimes they'll ask me questions about the opposing teams and things like that. So it's always great conversations.
Now, so Phil, who is your favorite Sun Belt coach to talk to? Because we've had several on, most notably there, Kane Womack, probably our greatest guest we've had on the football front. Who's your favorite guy to talk to?
Can't play favorites, sir. Can't play favorites. I talk to them all, so I don't want to play favorites, sir.
All right. Well, I don't want to get you in trouble, Phil, but I will hazard a guess that Terry Bowden was one of the most verbose of your discussions.
Oh, I tell you, Coach Bowden and I go back to his times when he was at Akron, like I said, and he would always say, this is prior to the transfer portal. Phil, if you know any players out there, let me know. We're always looking to add players, and so he's always been a great guy. In fact, he gave me a couple tips about radio shows and things like that. So yes, he is definitely a coach that I enjoyed and have a long relationship with as far as talking to him.
Terry Bowden was giving you broadcast tips.
Tips about booking radio stations and things like that. It was pretty good. I appreciated that. He's a guy that definitely cares.
Yeah, I think Terry Bowden has been one of the better additions to the Sun Belt. And Dusty, I think you'd agree. I think you'd agree that he has definitely added some color to that program.
He was a much needed hire for the Warhawk program, and anxious to see what he can do here in year 2. That's really his first year of this rebuild. Kind of got a late start into things last year, so he didn't really get to have his full hands on the program like he did this season. With that said, though, Phil, who are some of the big players individually that you see around the league that could be names that we need to know?
Well, I think if you start at the quarterback position, Grayson McCall is always a good place to start, and he's a guy that's going to put up big-time stats. He's been there. And I think that he's going to have himself a tremendous year. And then you look at a guy like Cam Peoples at App State or Rasheen Ali from Marshall. Those are 2 top-notch running backs that both are going to flirt, if not easily get 1,000-yard seasons this year. I'm going to miss watching Tolbert from South Alabama at the receiver spot.
Not me.
But Ali Jennings is a guy at Old Dominion that's probably way under the radar right now, and I think he could have a big year, as well as Chris Thornton at James Madison. And then, when you look on the defensive side of the ball, plenty of players going to emerge. A lot of the top players did indeed leave, but there's still guys like Josiah Stewart from Coastal Carolina, Chloe from Troy, part of that outstanding Troy defensive line that they have.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of great players to be looking at this year. And it seems like we just get more and more, but maybe dust as we get more and more teams. But it does seem like we are getting more and more. I don't want to say national names, although Grayson McCall definitely is a national name, but we're getting a lot of names out there that I think people are recognizing. And I think that's just a testament to how good the Sun Belt is moving forward. You had said that you thought that the Sun Belt was going to be one of the better G5 conferences this year. Would you rank those for us for G5, or would you rather keep that information close to the vest?
No, I do rank them in the magazine this year, and it's pretty close at the top. I mean, you take a look at. I do still rank the American at the top, but once again it's close. And then second, Mountain West, third, Sun Belt, and then fourth I've got CUSA, and then fifth is the MAC this year.
Well, let me tell you something. Now that this restructuring is happening, I'm seeing so many wild rumors. It doesn't look like we're even going to have 10 conferences next year. I don't know if Group of Five and Power Five is even going to be two distinctions. There might be multiple distinctions, which I imagine will just not really affect you because, like you said, you're just here on a team-by-team basis evaluating teams. Do you think that there will be any teams in college football in FCS that will kind of drop down to the FBS as a result of all of this?
I think the possibility exists. I can tell you next year there's teams coming up from the FCS, so it's we might have to expand the pages of the magazine. I think there's 2 or 3 more teams coming up that we have to add to it. So it's like I said before, I am not an expert on where these conferences are going. I don't think anybody in the country is an expert on where the conferences are going right now because, I mean, that Texas-Oklahoma thing took everybody by surprise, much as the USC-UCLA thing did.
No, absolutely. So, yeah, I believe that the magazine has been available for people who have pre-subscribed, but I don't think it comes out publicly until tomorrow. Am I correct?
That's right. It's going to hit. Well, it's at some Barnes and Nobles right now, so it's probably, out of all the Barnes and Nobles locations, it's probably at 20% of them. Should be about 50% of them tomorrow, maybe 75, 80% of them by Saturday, but definitely all of them by next Tuesday. But it has been popping up. I've been putting on my Twitter, which is at Phil Steele 042. If somebody buys one at a Barnes & Noble, I'll go ahead and show that it's available there. But, yeah, it's a magazine that's greatly anticipated, and it's been a frustrating year, frankly, magazine-wise for us. We had problems with the printer being late. We had problems with paper supply, so we could only print half of them and give them to Barnes & Nobles right now. We'll have them in all stores probably at the end of July when we get the second printing done. But it's been a rough year printing-wise, but it's going to be well worth the wait. As mentioned, I talked to 120 of the 131 head coaches out there, and we've got all the latest information, give you 2 pages of coverage on a team like Troy or Arkansas State, the same amount of coverage we give to Alabama, USC, and Ohio State. So it's well worth the wait, and it'll be out there this weekend at the Barnes & Nobles.
Well, so Phil, I know that you need no help there with marketing, but when will we see the Phil Steele New Orleans Bowl, the Phil Steele Mobile Bowl, and so forth?
My daughter wants me to do that. She goes, that'd be fun. We could go have our own bowl game. So maybe we'll get there.
Phil, I just want to admit that your magazine is my Bible for the whole football season. And when Dusty and I do this show, I always have it at my side so I can check it and make sure I've got all my facts straight. I'm a citizen of the Sun Belt, so is Dusty, but it seems like your knowledge of the Sun Belt trumps all of us. And I really do appreciate you being on this show. Dusty, do you have any more questions for Phil before we send him off to his next interview?
I do not. I am just appreciative of the legendary Phil Steele joining us and giving us the knowledge of a Sunbelt conference that we didn't have and allowing us to expand our knowledge.
Thank you so much, Phil. Phil, you are welcome anytime.
Hey, and I appreciate you guys having me on. And I got to tell you, it's always fun talking about the Sun Belt Conference as well. So thanks for having me on, and thanks for letting me talk Sun Belt football this last half hour.
It's our pleasure. Thank you very much. Interview with Phil Steele. Look at your college bookstore to find your copy of College 22 football preview. Like Phil said, it was kind of strange. I guess they were having some printing problems, so it might not appear at your local bookstore or magazine store when you want it, but it eventually come. And when it does, it's going to give you all the knowledge that you need. I thought what was interesting, Thibs, what he was when we asked them to give us some dirt, dish some tea about some of our Sunbelt college coaches. He was like, no, I'm not going to say anything negative about anybody. And I guess that's how Phil is able to talk to all these guys, is because he's not going to be a guy saying something like, oh yeah, that crazy Terry Bowden, he's just a nutbag. He's not going to say anything like that. He's going to keep it real.
No, he's definitely a guy that just keeps it all above board, keeps it real. One of the two magazines that I make sure every year that I have to run out and grab, that and Dave Campbell's The Recruiting Bible, so to say, for Texas athletics. So always have that copy. Have not been able to find it yet. As he said, printing issues are keeping it to where it is very tough to find right now. So when you find it, you got to make sure you grab it. It
is paper gold. You must have that. Shane, I know that it's your gold standard. What else do you get? Do you get Athlon? Do you get the others?
Yeah, I've got Athlon in front of me right now, but partially because they sent it right to my mailbox. I wrote the Jamie preview for that, so they comped me. So
that's awfully nice.
That's part of the reason. Yeah. Other than that, a lot of times I flip through them on the stand in the bookstore or whatever and decide which one I want to get.
We need Phil Steele to be our sponsor of the FunBelt podcast. That's what we need. We need him. His magazine should be a sponsor. And then that way, maybe we can get some free magazines.
Excellent.
Well, I just want dibs on the bowl game whenever he said he sponsors a bowl game. Since I pitched that to him, I stole it to him. We got to make sure that happens, and we are there covering it.
Right.
It should have a Sunbelt tie-in.
No doubt.
We need to make sure of that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right, this is the time where Thibs usually says, what is it? Something
plugs, promos, parting shots.
And parting shots. So I'm going to throw it to Thibs. Thibs, your plug, promo, and or parting shot.
As I mentioned on Twitter earlier this week, you mess with the bull, you get the horns. We didn't have a show last week for the 4th of July, but we got a show last week on the 4th of July for the Nathan's hot dog eating contest. How great is it? An injured Joey Chestnut not only repeats as champion, but does so after putting Darth Vader in a headlock. That should have been the headline more so than his accomplishment, is Chestnut headlocks Darth Vader. That, of course, being the protester that ran on stage for some kind of Smithfield protest of the company that makes the hot dogs that, they're bad for the environment, their meat and everything else.
I saw that clip, and Chestnut's a unit. He's not like some little guy. I mean, he's not like a big fat guy that you would expect who would eat a lot of hot dogs. He keeps in shape. And when he was sitting there on that busted leg, the guy comes busting in. He just kind of throws him in a headlock and then effortlessly just hurls him into the back, like behind him. Here, security. I did your job for you. And then continued eating. And then won.
True American champion.
Shane, get us your parting shot, your plug, or your promo, or all three.
Parting shot, I'll throw a bone to the Old Dominion fans because I'm a Kansas City Royals fan my entire life. They called up Monarch Vinny Pasquantino, need him to start hitting the ball a little bit more, but that's been a pretty exciting thing for both Monarchs and Royals fans because everybody's looking forward to when he finally made his Major League debut. And so that's my parting shot, is just recognizing the ODU baseball getting another guy into the majors. And yeah, it'll do it for me.
Well, I think that was great. That was inspiring. I like Old Dominion news. You know why? Because we don't know anything about Old Dominion, Thibs.
They do exist.
They do exist. They're part of the Sun Belt. I'm looking forward to playing them. I hope we get to know them a little bit better. my promo plug or parting shot. I really wanted to get a little philosophical. We were talking a little bit with Phil, and Phil was like, "Hey, I'm not an expert on this," but we talked a little bit about realignment. This new round, this unexpected round of the shift in conferences that I thought we were going to be done with for this season. I thought we were going to be done with it for a couple seasons. I thought things would settle down. Then you get like USC and UCLA just suddenly like, hey, we're joining the Big Ten, and then we're back in this mess again. And I know it's exciting for some people because it's new, right? It's a new storyline we can talk about in July. It's great to kind of figure out where all the dominoes are going to fall. But one thing that suffers the most from this is the fans. Who in the hell wants to see a UCLA versus Rutgers conference game? Nobody wants that. But we're going to get it anyway because there's too much money involved. There's so much on the table now. It's the money that matters and not really what the fans want anymore. We're losing the regional aspect of what made college football great. It's what makes the Sun Belt great. We have a nice regional footprint. We've got natural rivals. There's legitimate heat between the teams. Now we're creating a system where there is no heat. It's just marketed and packaged so we can buy, I don't know, more cable packages, more broadcast rights, more t-shirts. It doesn't really make sense anymore. It's really sucking dry what was great about college sports. So yeah, we may be excited for this expanded Super Big Ten and expanded Super SEC and watch it gobble up all these other conferences. Hey, that's great. It's fun for a while, but then we're going to lose something big. And that is my parting shot, Thibs.
In Keith Gill, we trust.
For myself, Jeremy Harper from Hellraiser. That's Thibs. Dustin Thibodeau from Warhawk Report.
Or Dustin.
Did I say Dustin?
You did.
Do you get that a lot?
Yeah, and we've only been together a year. Coming up there, Jeremy. How about that? Also, the show's right at a year.
Oh yeah, we need to celebrate that with pay raises. Let's get on that.
We'll have beignets in New Orleans.
Also with Shane Milton and oh my God, I cannot remember Shane's affiliation.
Daily News Record.
Daily News Record. Shane Milton with the Daily News Record. We are the FunBelt Podcast. We will see you next week.